So I'm browsing the internet in December 2017, checking up on the latest TV and movie releases when I see one simply titled Happy, Season 1, Episode 1. Now I like to keep an eye out for newer shows so I can jump on board while it's still fresh. Makes it easier than having to binge watch several seasons of a long running show just to catch up. Now I must admit I don't do this as much as I'd like to because I have a pretty bad track record when it comes to getting into shows that I start to like only for them to end up being cancelled after just one season. Shows like Selfie, Powerless and The Muppets. I'm starting to notice a weird trend of 20-minute comedies. Anyways, so I click on the episode and straight away the poster raises some immediate questions. What the heck is this disheveled guy doing with a blue CGI'd unicorn horse thing? I watched the trailer and then and there knew that this was going to be some insane, obscure work of art that was either going to turn out brilliant, or as my partner said after watching the trailer, stupid. This is very much a show aimed at an older audience, as the trailer and marketing makes clear. If you're not comfortable with a fair bit of stylized blood and a lot of violence and foul language, then save yourself a review and just stick to reruns of Friends. Now, to be fair, this is not something I could have seen myself watching a few years back, but having opened myself up to more bizarre shows, like masterpieces such as The Mighty Boosh, I am a lot more open to a premise as wacky and zany as this. And shows like The Walking Dead and Game of Thrones pretty much have me desensitized to the colour red. Now, it's not constantly bloody, but I'll get onto those inconsistencies later on. Happy is an 8-episode sci-fi series based on a 4-issue comic book from 2012. The trailer for the show doesn't accurately represent the tone or story of the show, but instead gives you a preview of what you're in for. Straight off the bat, I have to acknowledge a pretty huge character trait that the show introduces as a seemingly important plot element, but it's treated like no big deal. Nick Sachs, the main character, is a hitman who cannot die. He mentions this briefly in his opening monologue, accompanying that weird shot from the trailer that is irrelevant to the rest of the series. It seems like having a main character that keeps coming back to life would be a pretty major part of the show, but apart from the first episode, it never really comes up again, and we get zero explanation as to how or why he's like this. Season 2 mystery? Maybe? Whatever, that aside, the series had me gripped from the get-go. A little girl gets kidnapped by this really creepy homeless-looking Santa guy and her imaginary friend. Just go with it. A perky blue horse named Happy sets out to find a hero who can help rescue her. That someone, of course, is Nick Sachs, but as Happy soon finds out, he's no hero. I'm going to do my best to avoid spoilers because if you couldn't tell by now, I really recommend watching this show. The first 3 episodes move at a really good pace, with important characters being introduced, seemingly inconsequential side plots being brought up to hopefully get resolved later on, and it's just a really good couple of hours of hilarious humour, mystery, and outstanding action. Episode 4 is where it got a little lost for me, as it was the first episode I didn't really feel went anywhere. That was when the show took a break over Christmas, which I thought was a bit weird, seeing how the show actually took place over Christmas. Whatever, I was really looking forward to the next episode coming out, but when it did, Episode 5 ended really silly. I hoped it wouldn't fall flat after that. Oh, I'd almost forgotten what it was like having to wait week after week for a show to come out that I actually enjoyed watching. Unlike The Walking Dead and Doctor Who, instead of having it all come out at once. Thank goodness episodes 6 and 7 were still great and continued building and expanding upon all the characters' relationships and continuing the intrigue as to what the heck was going on with this deranged Santa guy. After watching episode 7, I had a sad realization. There was only 1 episode left to go, and at least half a dozen stories left to wrap up in a nice Christmas bow. I began to worry that this was going to be another situation like Lost or Stranger Things, where they present some really interesting or confusing stuff, but then don't address or answer them, or just give a half-hearted excuse of, we'll get there next season. But unlike those shows that are just presenting things out of the blue, Happy builds them up so that when the finale comes around, the payoff feels satisfying. Sorry, this became more about my disappointment with Lost and Stranger Things than Happy. Where was I? Oh yes! With only 1 episode to go, we had a Santa on the run, a mob boss in the hands of a policewoman looking for revenge, a bunch of disgruntled imaginary friends, a really weird bug cult thing, and more going on at once. Now, to the show's credit, this isn't Game of Thrones with a million different stories going on, but staying mostly separate to each other. Everything plays into the main overarching story, while still providing intrigue into what's going on behind the scenes. Full disclosure, Leading up to this point, I had been giving way too many excuses for enjoying Happy, despite its few shortcomings. What I mean is there were a few scenes that were just awkward and not every joke landed, and I had unintentionally began binge watching another show called Future Man. It's similar yet so different and brilliant, and you should watch it. But it did put things into perspective for me. Here's this new show that I'm loving all the way through, having a blast, whereas here's a weekly show that I really like, but it has its ups and downs, and it really all comes down to that final episode. So episode 8 rolls around, and yes, the show ends incredibly well. Again, no spoilers, but the main plot is resolved in a way that ties a fair few things together and is overall a funny, action-fueled acid trip of a story. And what I really liked is that all these little things I was worrying about, like sub-stories not getting fully resolved. I'm looking at you, you weird old witch doctor lady. Really matter because they didn't matter in the context of the show, but instead gave more weight to the subplot going on behind the scenes with the creepy bug geezer and the dead man walking, which will be explored in season 2. Thankfully, it did get reviewed for a second season. Now, I understand I didn't give away many plot details because, firstly, spoilers, duh. Secondly, I doubt you're here for a detailed plot analysis. You just want to know if this show is worth a watch. Well, I can honestly say that if the things I mentioned at the start of the video don't bother you, the absurd premise of a CGI imaginary friend buddying up with an unkillable ex-cop with its fair share of R-rated violence and language, then heck yes, you should definitely give the show a shot. Hopefully, if you go into it with an open mind, you'll have a fair bit of fun and be thoroughly entertained. Now, all the hype and praise aside, it's by no means perfect. As I said before, I had to make a fair few excuses for this show. Least of all is Nick's ability to not stay dead being superfluous to the overall narrative. The main problem with Happy is tonal inconsistencies. I mean, to be fair, it's to be expected when you combine an R-rated, swearing, trigger-happy hitman with the imaginary friend of an 8-year-old girl. It works most of the time, but occasionally the funny faces and child-friendly one-liners come across as something straight out of the Thor Ragnarok script. That is to say, it would have been funny under different circumstances, but instead comes off pretty cringy. The best way to describe it is in episode 3. During a pivotal flashback sequence where we go from a truly harrowing scene regarding a microwave, honestly, the implications are truly horrible, to a bit of light-hearted banter and what I like to call Martin Freemaning. When you don't know how to act, you just frown, clench your jaw, and clear your throat, like this is how Martin Freeman acts. This is a rare occurrence, but it happened often enough for me to notice, and honestly it probably isn't even that big of a deal, but the show is just so good it was the only major negative I could think to say about it. A tiny inconsequential nitpick of mine is the acting of the guy who plays the mob boss. He chooses to speak like this, where he over-enunciates his words, but still speaks with an accent, so he sounds like Christopher Walken with something stuck in his teeth.
It's no secret that I have done some bad things in my time. I haven't always been a good man. Oh, no, it's true. But there is one low to which I have never sunk, and I never will.
This scene goes on for 5 minutes! But that's just me. Something that could be perceived as a negative might be the idea that some of the side plots and characters don't really go anywhere in the grand scheme of things. By that is when you're watching something for the first time, you expect that everything is going to have a satisfying payoff in the end, but then upon reflection you realise that everything you just watched was pointless. Ah, Casino Planet, why do you exist? And while I can understand that thought process, I'd have to argue that each important character got a resolution, and all the main plots culminated together in either a satisfying conclusion or a well-developed tease for season 2. Gotta have something to go on, right? Although thinking about it now, that Agent Coulson looking creep was a character I really didn't like in the end, and I would have preferred if he was removed completely. His final scene was just a little too much for my liking. Last negative, I swear, the child actors are bad. Plain and simple, they suck.
I'll never forget you.
Unlike everybody else who fully commits to their absurd roles. Chris Maloney kills it as Nick Sachs. He nails the nihilistic, sarcastic nature of the character and does an impeccable job of acting around something that isn't really there. Patton Oswalt is great as Happy, and I have to say his voice fits him a lot more than Bobby Moynihan, who played him in the pilot. Ugh. I don't know who played the weird Santa, but he absolutely owned his performance. If I saw this guy in the street, I'd run far and run fast. Everything is shot really well and clearly has a lot of effort put into it, which I assume is a rare thing coming from a sci-fi show? I don't know, I know they had something to do with falling skies, but aren't these the same guys that air the terrible Sharknado movies? Oh, in any case, every new bizarre element the show throws at you. Whether it be a children's entertainer who doubles as an evil beetle or a support group for unwanted imaginary friends, as long as you keep an open mind, I definitely think you'll have a good time watching this. Or you might find it incredibly stupid like my partner thought after seeing that trailer. After all, she does have better taste than I do. But as for myself, I'm happy to say that I really enjoyed this, and I greatly look forward to seeing what the next season brings, and what mysteries will be revealed. Seriously though, when that pink mascot was shot, something came pouring out of it. That was no mascot. They have got to explain this next season. I'd like to thank you all very much for watching this review. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of the show if you decide to check it out, and I'll catch you guys next time. This is probably going to be the next Telltale Games game if it gets popular, because I mean they've already got old Oswald from Male Jesse as Minecraft Story Mode. Oh please, Telltale, just stop.